Let me bring in Victorian Liberal MP Tim Smith into the studio. Good to see you, Tim.
Chris, thank you so much for having me.
Now, let me talk, before we go to Victorian state politics, let me talk about why the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, and the Liberals lost the blue ribbon seat of Kooyong. You've written interestingly about this and say essentially the Liberals weren't in the fight. There was no contest.
Well, I've certainly said that the campaign lacked a message, but, you know, losing Josh is a tragedy.
It is, indeed. But
for the party, and I mean, equally with guys like Dave Sharma and the like. And look, it is a global trend. We're seeing inner urban elites voting for the left all around the world. The 12 wealthiest districts in the US House of Representatives are held by the Democrats. The seat of Kensington in London, which includes Belgravia, Knightsbridge, Kensington Palace, is held by the Tories by a mere 150 votes. In 2017, Jeremy Corbyn's Labor Party actually won the seat of Kensington.
Because these people are campaigning on post-material concerns, right?
Correct. So,
luxury beliefs.
Correct. These people are wealthy enough to indulge themselves in the climate alarmism that you've been, for example, talking about this evening.
Well, that's the problem then. The coalition, if anyone's going to fight back, it has to be the coalition to put some facts on the table. And
my point is that we should be pushing back on, for example, the crazy idea that the Teals were running on, which is a 60% reduction in emissions by 2030, because it's not realistic. I mean, Labor's plan is 43%, which I think is, you know, frankly, too much. But 60% by 2030, I mean, that's going to cause mayhem for energy supply reliability and indeed prices.
And none of the wind turbines or hydrogen plants are going into the Teal electorates again.
I did notice today that Peter Dutton did actually talk about nuclear power.
Well, see, this is the point, right? Sure, everyone wants to look after the planet, but they exaggerate the threat and they're not held to account for their policy. 60%, as you say, unachievable and incredibly expensive as well. And their advertising suggests that our climate will change. We'll get less severe bushfires and less severe droughts and floods if we do this. They know this is nonsense, but the Liberals have been too timid to call this out for want of being called deniers.
Let the facts speak for themselves. I mean, these are some of the most highly educated electorates in the world, frankly. Make the case.
I couldn't agree more. You got to. No one can follow the arguments unless someone is making them.
The argument.
Now, just on that though, with a state election due in Victoria in November, a lot of talk now the Teals are going to target state seats in some of the same areas. They could run amok.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. And I mean, I suppose it'll be a slightly different dynamic because the incumbent obviously is the Labor Party. And will the Teals really show their hand and run against a Liberal opposition as opposed to a Labor government? Now, the seat of Hawthorn. Now, there are four state seats, within the federal seat of Kooyong.
Yep.
3 are currently held by the Labor Party. I'm the last remaining Liberal. Will these characters run against sitting Labor MPs, particularly given that their targets on climate change are far more extreme than the Labor Party's? And also, there is an integrity problem in Victoria, which these independents seem so terribly concerned about.
It would be fascinating. It's a good point, whether they'll run against Labor here or just try and knock out a couple of Liberals and put pressure on Labor.
Because if they are genuinely concerned about integrity, and you've seen the enormous cuts that the Andrews government have made to our anti-corruption body in Victoria and the massive controversies that Labor is currently faced with at that anti-corruption body, well, you'd think if the Teals were being legitimate and consistent, they'd be running against Labor MPs too.
Well, that's a fair point. But on your side of politics, given the way the Liberals have failed against the Teals in the federal election, have they left themselves open to that sort of a tactic in the state election?
Well, they're certainly emboldened. There's no doubt about that. And I've seen the commentary all day today about that. And you would have, with respect, this is an issue that needs to be taken seriously. And I mean, I've been accused of saying that we should abandon the inner city. I have never said that. I've simply said I think we need to be more focused on the middle and outer suburbs because I think that is where the true forgotten people currently live. However, I'm not suggesting for a moment we abandon the inner city. But we need a strategy and indeed a campaign to deal with these people and, frankly, the nonsense that they campaign on.